So today we have the amazing privilege of being with the founder of Brave Co. Jason Valentin is spearheading a movement of what does it look like to be a healthy male leading in spaces where culture is trying to sequester men and call them patriarchal, instead of how do we redeem what the damage of the past and not replicate that by any means, but also not create a really dysfunctional misalignment as an overreaction in society. So what was the incipiting factors that led to starting Brave Co? Thank you for being our guest, Jason.
Yeah, it's so good to be here. Honestly, since I was a really young boy, 13 years old, I've had a heart to see men restored back into their full creation, back to how God intended them to be. And that just came with growing up in a home where my dad told me stories about David and his mighty man and about these guys who were outcasts, the nobodies that God used then to transform nations and cities. And so I remember when I heard that when I was a young boy, that I just like, it burned in my heart. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to see men restored. And it's kind of a gift, to be so young and to know, okay, this is what my life's call is about. And I think a lot of people kind of mess up, and they, like, I won't go too far down a rabbit trail, but a lot of people find a calling like that and then they think I have to be a pastor, right? But for me, I did it for a long time. I worked with a lot of people before I was ever a pastor, and I fought fire for a lot of years. And I just did that. Anywhere I went, I would just find guys who were hurting, who were believing lies, who were broken, and just poured in life and identity. And so, in 2018, I really felt like God told me, I want you to give me something I can bless. I want you to, that dream that's been in your heart, I want you to take a risk on that. And so it was a long road to actually starting Brave Co, but that's really when I started to go, okay, I think I'm going to start a men's movement. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I just need to start the first step. And so we did that in 2019. We had a men's retreat, and that led to, eventually building out discipleship programs and conferences and things like that. So it's been a really fun 3 years of just building and growing and seeing men's lives changed and all of that stuff. And it's been hard too.
Yeah, I'm sure. So how would you describe this in a society that says, men have all the power and patriarchy, and we have a whole Barbie movie that just reinforces that doctrine? How would you describe Brave Co in the way that you're authentically trying to help men walk in their true identity?
What we all really need in this world is healthy, whole people. And so, men can be as toxic as women, and
Yeah.
it's not a gender, right? It's about being healthy. And so, when you try to alienate men because there are unhealthy men on the planet, well, then you lose the value in the gift that a man brings.
Right.
And so, a man's supposed to bring identity. He's supposed to bring peace to chaos. He's supposed to carry a load that is different than what a woman is supposed to carry. And we live in the most fatherless culture that's ever been alive, where our fathers aren't at home because they're at war. No, they're just not at home because they don't want to be at home. And the damaging effects of that, just take one simple Google search, the statistics on what happens without a father at home, it's devastating. It's the main source of incarceration for men. It's the leading cause of suicide. It's it's abortion. It's why women are having abortions in droves. It's why anger and outbursts. And it's just, you go down the line, and you start to see when a dad's not at home, it induces so much pain. If you don't have tools to work through pain, then you end up doing things that you don't want to do. And so, the real call is not just to get men back home, because a lot of men are home, but they're not present. So that's a factor that we don't talk about a lot.
Yes.
Is because not a lot of men have really been equipped, right? Have really been given the tools that they need to successfully navigate life well and navigate their family well and show up for life. And so
Mhm.
that's what we're trying to do at Brave Co. We're not trying to build macho men. Macho men aren't helpful. We're not trying to, build weak men. We're trying to give men the tools that they need to live a healthy, strong, powerful, connected life. That's the biggest key to what we're doing is we're not doing conferences, although we have conferences, but the conferences lead into discipleship. We're
And if
not just
somebody's
doing,
listening and they don't know the word discipleship, like give me context. What does that word mean?
yeah. So discipleship is basically walking alongside somebody and giving them the tools, the strength, the encouragement to grow. And Jesus, when he was on the earth, he that was his strategy and plan to change the world forever. Is he when he came in the flesh, he realized, okay, if I can get 12 guys and impart all that I am, impart all that I know, and then let them come beside me and build confidence, let them come beside me and fail and learn and grow. That's the ultimate strategy to changing the planet. And so when we look at, how do you grow men? How do you change society? How do you, how do we transform a nation? Well, you do it through discipleship. You don't do it through teaching. You don't do it through talking. You do it through discipleship, which has teaching, but it's life on life. And so that's really what we're doing with men is this life on life model where we walk beside men, give them the skills, give them the tools, and then we're honest and we're open and we're transparent and we're encouraging and all those things that it takes to really learn and grow.
Absolutely. And so many men haven't had the example. And so much of our
Yeah.
mirror neuron processing of how to do something comes through a model, a template, a relational experience. And so most of the men I work with are strong leaders. They do great at work. They love their family. They provide, they show up. But there's often a disconnect in the ability to do intimacy and really see and know their spouse and their kids. Can you speak to that and why you think that might be?
It's what's modeled for us, right? So your first gift as a human being is supposed to be your first inheritance is supposed to be an inheritance of identity, of nurture, of,
Yeah.
Bonding and connect, learning that you are unconditionally loved. And that's supposed to happen through building these incredible bonds, right? You were supposed to come out of your mother's womb and she was supposed to nurture you and hold you close and talk to you and study you and learn you so well that you build this healthy attachment, right? This emotional attachment. And your dad is supposed to do the same thing, right? You're supposed to feel safe and cared for and adored and loved. And again, you build this healthy attachment and you learn how to regulate your emotions through attaching to, your family and then your community and the world around you. Well, most people weren't given that.
Right.
Most people were given a very anxious attachment, or their parents weren't very present, or maybe you didn't have a dad at home, and so that's a lot of the world that is alive today. Is you grew up without getting a good inheritance, and in return, what you get is you get a whole bunch of wiring, right? We often think that we're the ones that wired ourselves. We're not the ones that wired ourselves. If you're watching this right now and you grew up and you felt confident and beautiful and capable, it's because someone told you that you were beautiful. Someone gave you challenges. Somebody walked beside you. They taught you that it's okay to fail.
Yeah.
But most people weren't taught that. And so you feel like you don't have what it takes. You don't feel confident. You don't feel capable. And, you're struggling and suffering. And that's because of how you were born. That's not because something's wrong with you. It's not because you were made wrong. It's not because, you're bad. It's because you weren't given a gift of identity when you were young. The most men were hearing a message. You've got to suck it up. You got to quit crying. Most men were taught that showing emotion led to pain, right? It led to more rejection.
Yeah.
And we like this idea of stoicism. We like this idea that, the man that can do it on his own, the guy that can just suck it up, the guy that doesn't share what's inside, that's the strongest man around, the guy that can just absorb everything. And honestly, that guy is lonely. He's dying. He's desperate for connection and terribly afraid to talk about it. And so, nothing feels weaker for a man than to come and stand before his wife and to say, I don't know how to fix something. I feel overwhelmed. I'm feeling anxious. I don't feel like I'm enough. Nothing feels more connecting to a woman than for her husband to stand in front of her and say, I don't know how to fix this, but I'll be here with you. I feel anxious, but I'm going to be honest about it. I'm working through, whatever. I feel sad today. Nothing feels more connecting to a woman than that, because we connect through our emotions. So, it wasn't very awesome, wasn't very cool to do that as a teenager, wasn't very cool to do that as a little kid, as a little boy. Those weren't our models. Our models are Superman, Hulk Hogan, our models are The Rock. Our models aren't these guys that have, high emotional intelligence. And so our experiences plus our role models just really equal what we reproduce over and over again. So a lot of men are suffering trying to be the strong Lone Ranger. And you do that for a while. And it's also why we have a high divorce rate and why guys are medicating and, all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're wondering why we're struggling with alcohol and porn and all of these things, as if that's an outlier instead of the natural cause and effect. If you don't medicate the soul and it's not getting any relief, eventually the dam is going to leak. And so then we just keep putting more temporary solutions. So my passion is to remove the shame from that we don't feel bad for ourselves, male or female, but to learn, there's steps I have to go backward and find out what's the misalignment, what's the lie I'm believing that's causing my false self of masculinity and tough and I don't need anybody, to then create an artificial shell around me where everything is getting locked inside. And it's like a pressure cooker. Eventually that temper is going to come out. Eventually, somebody says or does the wrong thing and the irritability, and then you're like, I'm a bad person. So then shame shuts down the cycle even more. So we can see that. What do you think are practical things men can do to start re-engaging from their true self, from healthy masculinity?
You started talking about addiction. Addiction starts in our life when we can no longer bear being present in our life. Mm-hmm. And I think guys have to start to go back and really understand their story, because most men don't understand their story. They don't know why they are the way that they are, how they actually got there. And what you misdiagnose, you mistreat every time. And so that's why we try to use shame. It's why we try to use perfectionism. It's why we, use the false self control. It's because we're trying to get a better outcome, but it doesn't really work because you don't understand how you actually got to where you're at. And so in Brave Co, what we have guys do is actually go through and map their life, their highs, their lows, the messages that were taught to them. Write down a paragraph of what you believed to be true about yourself at 12 years old. And then write down a paragraph of what you believe to be true about yourself at 18 years old, and start to unpack, like, man, if you didn't feel like you were worthy of love and you felt like a failure at 12 years old, you're not the one creating that. It's your environment, the world around you. And what that says is the way that you are right now is not your fault. It's your responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's your responsibility. So it's being proactive, right? It's taking so much courage to be able to be honest about where you're really at, and then being willing to share your story with powerful people that can help you unpack it. Until you're able to really share your story, you don't feel worthy of love. Mm-hmm. You're not able to receive real care. You're not able to really connect with people. And so again, it just goes back into that isolation. So part of it is like, once you understand your story, now I have to be able to tell it. I got to be able to unpack it. I got to be able to mourn through the places where my dad didn't meet me, my mom failed me, whatever. And then undo the lies that came from that. Mm-hmm. But then I also have to go through a process. So this process, the healing process, sets you up now for your now initiation. Because if you didn't get initiated as a man from other men, right, in your life, then you have to do it now. I have to start challenging myself to show up. I have to learn healthy communication. I have to learn how to regulate my emotions. And, I got to do hard things. And that's not an easy thing to do, but anything that you shy away from, eventually catches up with you. So it's like you just have to pick what kind of hard you're going to do. If you don't want to work out, well, then you're going to pick the hard of living an unhealthy life, of being overweight. And if you don't want to, work hard on your marriage, then you're going to work hard having a bad marriage. And so, at some point, us men have to go, well, I either die under the weight of being afraid all the time, or I face my fears and I learn how to live a powerful, healthy, whole life. And both of them are hard. Just one has a big reward at the end.
That's so good. So it's inspiring us to really take ownership, look at the past, and grieve and mourn that, and also responsibility. Because I hear a lot of men saying, oh my gosh, I don't want to be, a stereotype, looking back, feeling sorry for myself, I'm a victim, and there's kind of this culture around counseling forever instead of truly looking back for the purpose of healing and then now taking ownership and responsibility. So what have you seen as a distinction for men when they just are victims of the past / never look back, versus what you're seeing as testimonies of men who are doing that work of balancing, doing the healthy looking back, and then now taking responsibility in the present?
It's crazy because if you don't go back at least a little bit and start to address, again, the problem is you don't really understand you. And well, you're the most important person to understand because you're really responsible to meet your needs and show up for, and you have to love you like you love everyone else. And if you don't love you, well, then you're really going to live a unlovable life. And so I think the value of going back isn't that you would be a victim, because the victim's the most powerless person alive. The value of going back is that you could set that little boy free from the lies and the bondage that he's been held in forever. So, we are every age we've ever been. That's trauma. And it's not the 43-year-old that's afraid of relationships. It's the 27-year-old whose wife left him. It's not the 43-year-old that's afraid of whatever, adults, grown men. It's the little boy that was yelled at a lot. It's that guy. And so, a lot of men don't understand, like, you've got a little boy leading a man's life. If you don't want that little boy leading a man's life, then you got to go back and meet him where he's at. Take a little bit of time and heal that, so that then you can lead your own life. You can powerfully show up for yourself. And so, I've watched, we've discipled over 1,000 guys at this point, and I've watched so many men, especially men in their marriages, where, man, they're just having such a hard time showing up, being present for the wife, because really, how could you show up for anyone else if you didn't show up for you? Yeah. And so when they start to go back and they start to be present and they start to work through some of their pain and learn healthy boundaries and heal the father wounds, well, now I'm able to show up to my wife because I actually have a place of compassion to pull from. I have some tools. And same thing with their kids. They're not leading their kids out of fear. Mm-hmm. They're now leading their kids from a powerful place of health. And so, they're able to show up for the kids and their friends. And it's not a perfect magic pill, because we're constantly, I'm constantly growing, and we all go through hard things in life. So it's like, you're not just going to go see a counselor one time in your life and that's it. But I do think you got to do the bulk of the work somewhere. And again, you either pay from not doing it and carrying it forever because you got a backpack on that's full of all your stuff, or you take some time to offload that backpack, put in it what you need to, what's responsible, and take out of it what's unnecessary weight. So, it's a great way for guys to get their life back.
I love that. And to clarify, a lot of men say, oh yeah, I know that I had single mom, I was molested, I was bullied, I was yelled at a lot. And so just knowing that, to clarify for the audience, doesn't mean you've actually unpacked and processed and healed from that. So I think there's a lot of men and humans by nature, we have nerve endings at the end of our hand. And so our hand is saying, whoa, pull away from pain. just like that, on the inside, we have defense mechanisms that go into intellectualization. It's a common defense response where I talk about trauma and the past, and I'm like, I'm good. I know about that. I dealt with that. I'm good. I even did that in my own life where I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good. And I hadn't actually grieved and worked through the emotion. So I want to clarify, just because we can acknowledge what we've gone through, that's an essential key to bring it into light, but it's not actually healed yet. So a lot of times people think, I went to a weekend seminar, I went to this, and that doesn't mean you actually allowed yourself to grieve. So if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh no, I've already done that work, that doesn't apply to me, maybe become more curious, because wherever you have pain, right, like a reaction that you're like, that's not my normal character, why am I acting like that? Then there's a nerve ending inside that it's rooted from. Because you're not bad, you're not a monster, there's not something wrong with you. So a temper, a sexual acting out, a reaction, or shutting down and becoming depressed, whatever that might be, or even panic attacks, just become really curious of what was happening right before that might have triggered or elicited that response. And now you can find out, oh, what part of my soul is defending he who protesteth too much from something that's really actually painful. Because we know anger and sad are the same emotion. So when there's pain, then we bow up, we protect ourselves, or different personality. When there's pain, we shut down, we become sullen and quiet. We're in the room, but you don't get access to me. Those are common strategies that our inner world does to kind of put a scab around a pain, instead of like what Brave Co is encouraging, of actually doing that deeper work and doing it in healthy relationship with other men, so that you're not alone and you actually have a guide to walk with you. And I love this model. How can people get plugged in and connected with you guys?
Yeah, so they can go to braveco.org and they can start a group, or if there's pastors watching this, like, we build discipleship models for churches as well. So you can take your men through our 12-week discipleship course, our Foundations of Masculinity, which lays out everything that you need. It's pre-recorded content. We have guides to learn how to lead small groups, and then guys can jump on a monthly call with me. If you're a church leader, or if you're just a guy in Braveco, you can jump on a monthly call with me, ask any questions you want, and again, we just help you grow, walk alongside you. So
I love it. I love the investment. We have such a reactionary culture where it's like, oh, this is bad, so we go to the other pendulum and we throw a whole category of people away, instead of really investing and bringing out the gold and the best. What do you think, for fathers listening, what is the number one thing that we need to see from fathers to invest in their kids?
I think intentionality. Guys are so intentional when it comes to sports or our hobbies. We put so much time into thinking about it, and there's no shame in that. It's just where we feel powerful, right? It's where we feel capable, and it's part of where we get an outlet. But if we applied that same intentionality to our families, well, in the short term, it's a lot of work. In the long run, there's so much reward in it, And so I think for dads, just really thinking through, how do I build a connection with my son? How do I build a connection with my daughter? Pre-planning, what am I going to do today when I get home? Will it be something fun? Making sure that you're connecting with your wife on a daily basis, which would be being able to share your emotions, being able to hear her emotions, sending her messages throughout the day that tell her what you think about her, being present when she has needs, being present when your kids have needs. I just think, like, the intentional fathers really it's really the goal for all of us. And that's a struggle. That's not easy. I have to work at that when I go home, because it's hard. When I go home, I know the kids are going to be demanding. I know that my wife's going to have needs. She's going to be tired. And the easiest thing to do is, like, I'm going to put on my podcast and go work outside. I'm going to go do something that really needs done. But the truth is like, what really needs done is connection. Yeah. That's what really needs done.
That's amazing. And for any woman who's listening, how can women be intentional to create space and opportunity for their husbands to lead? Maybe in some dynamics where we're kind of still fleshing that out and figuring it out.
I think a woman's belief in a man is more powerful than she thinks. As a woman, when you show up and you encourage before he goes to work, you pray for him, you pour into him. Um, that respect piece is big. It's a lot of what fuels a man is like, man, my wife really respects me. And I know the challenge, right? So I just want to throw this out there. The challenge for a lot of women is like, well, my husband doesn't doesn't do things that are respectable, you know?
Mhm.
And I have a hard time believing in my husband because he doesn't show up for me. And the truth is like sometimes you have to give before you get a lot. And I'm not talking about abusive stuff, and people always want to go like, well, what about if your husband's abusing you? It's like, well, set some healthy boundaries, learn some communication.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like if we only invest in people when they're kind and perfect and show up all the time, like what kind of return are you going to get there?
Yeah.
So I just think like for a wife to think through, how can I show up for my husband, encourage him, pour into him, see what I see in, tell him what I see in him, be there
Mhm.
emotionally for him. Because if your husband believes that you care for him and love him, and even especially if he's not showing up well, he's way more likely to want to confront that area of his life and to step up. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of women can do that. I know for me, when my wife sends me a text that says, babe, I just want you to know how much I believe in you. And here's the three things that I've seen you do this week that have just made me feel, and I may have done 15 things that made her feel not seen, not cared for, but she's focusing on, she's being intentional to highlight and to say to me, you're a good man. I love you. I care for you. Thank you. And I naturally want to turn towards her. I naturally want to increase that. I know that I can win. And
Mhm.
so, I think a lot of women can really encourage their man just by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what if somebody is in a situation where they're like, my spouse doesn't know the Lord and I want to call out that strength? Any tips, advice there?
Yeah, it says the kindness of God leads us to repentance, right? So
Mhm.
God's strategy and his plan for people who aren't walking with him is kindness.
Mhm.
It's unconditional love, which doesn't mean no boundaries. It doesn't mean abuse. But there's a lot of people who just really are struggling. And if your husband's if he's backslidden, it's because he's in pain. It's because he's struggling somewhere. So, what would happen if you showed up for him emotionally? What would happen if you were connecting to him regardless of whether he's saved or not? And so I just think like it's your chance to walk with him
Mhm.
regardless of if he's walking with God or not. My vows to my wife weren't for better or for worse if you're following God. My vows to my wife were for better or for worse till death do us part. And there's a lot of choices that our spouses are going to make throughout life that, man, we wish they wouldn't make and are really painful. My job as a helpmate is to be a help, is to come alongside and to be there for them. So I really do think that that's a lot of the key, to helping someone through hard times is just being there for them. It doesn't mean that you approve of what they're doing, but it does mean that you're there for them when they need you.
And their personhood, even when their behavior doesn't align with it.
Yeah,
And what do you
100%.
recommend in raising sons?
So we have to understand that if you want a strong, capable, healthy man, then you have to create an environment where kids feel unconditionally loved,
Mhm.
seen, known. When I was young, my dad looked at me and he said, "Hey, son, make all of your mistakes at home because you have mom and I here to help you." And it was awesome. Then he backed it up by what happened when I made a mistake.
Mm.
There wasn't shame. There wasn't condemnation. There was definitely correction. My dad was not soft. He was not afraid to tell me what he thought. It was just always covered in love and covered in care. And so I did a ton of failing. I did a ton of exploring. I explored my sexuality for a long time when I was young. And that was with boys, that was with pornography, that was in masturbation. And my parents, I told them all of it.
Mhm.
And, I had oral sex with one of my guy friends for a while. And I was really young. I remember telling my dad, and he just said, "Oh, son, you're just curious, you don't need to do that." And without a dad, I would think that I was a homosexual. That's what I would think today. I would
Yeah.
struggle with that.
Yeah.
But you're not your worst day. You're not you're
Mhm.
not your worst action. You're the values and virtues that you embrace. And so my dad taught me that as a young man. On top of that, he told me I was important by doing things with me, by spending time with me and giving me challenges, giving me hard things to do. And so I think if there's moms watching this, it's like, have your boys carry the groceries in, have them lift heavy things that are appropriate for them. Have them open the door for you when you go through the door. Give them some small challenges that let them know that they're growing up, they're becoming a man, and you see that, and you're looking to pour into that. And if you're a dad, it's just like bring your sons alongside of you in a way that they feel needed.
Yeah.
They lift half of the picnic table. They mow the lawn, half of the lawn. They whatever as appropriate. And as they grow older, you make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And my dad let me into a lot of the challenges in business that he was facing when it was appropriate. I mean, he taught me the value of working hard. I did a lot of work when I was young that I didn't get paid for because it's what we do as a family. But they
Mm.
talked me through it. And so what it did is it gave me identity. I get to be a part of the family. I get to be a contributor. I get to be a Valatin. We had a creed growing up that my dad taught me through doing, and he taught me through how he talked to us and how he cleaned up messes and how he took risks. And I just think you can't estimate the value of that kind of living. It's
Mhm.
everything.
Absolutely. And in a snowflake culture that wants to just coddle and protect boys, what would you recommend that would help not become crazy with no boundaries, but like actually instill more masculinity in our boys?
Well, where are they going to get the strength to handle what real life throws at us?
Mhm.
That's the real question, right? Because every one of us, everyone, every person that listens to this has hard things coming their way.
Yes.
Your tires are currently wearing out in your car. You're aging. Your body doesn't work the same today as it did yesterday. Your finances are going to be up and down. I know as believers we go from glory to glory, but it's hell in the hallway, right? That glory to glory is not fun on top of fun.
Right.
It's perseverance, it's long suffering that leads to character, that leads to hope, right? That's Romans. As Romans is going, hey, when you suffer for a long time, that builds perseverance. When you build perseverance, that builds character. When you build character, that builds hope inside of you, faith and hope. And like that's God's recipe for developing you. That's his recipe for making you a strong believer. Well, how could we raise kids that are strong, that are capable, that are confident, if we don't allow them to struggle? If
Thank you for investing in yourself, your family, and your team. We are honored to serve you and your vision.